It begins with the sound of wind, a cold, endless wind sweeping across a frozen valley. Snowflakes swirl around the bones of ancient beasts. In this vast, merciless world, the first humans struggled not for dominance, but for survival. Hunger was their constant companion. Food was never guaranteed. And what they ate to stay alive, you probably wouldn't. Tens of thousands of years ago, Earth was locked in the grip of the Ice Age. Temperatures plunged, forests shrank, and herds of mammoth and bison migrated across endless tundras. For the small bands of early humans who followed them, every day was a test of endurance. They were hunters, yes, but also scavengers, opportunists, and survivors of a brutal food chain where failure meant death. To understand what cavemen truly ate, we have to strip away the romantic image of spears, fires, and feasts. Survival back then was ugly. It was raw, and it often came down to what was left after predators had already taken their share. Archaeologists have unearthed bones from ancient sites bearing deep-cut marks, not just from hunting tools, but from desperate attempts to scrape every last scrap of flesh and marrow. Some of these bones are not from animals, but from humans. Evidence of cannibalism has been found in caves across Europe and Asia, suggesting that when starvation struck, the line between food and friend vanished completely. But this wasn't madness. It was survival. Early humans didn't have the luxury of choice. They ate what nature provided, and sometimes what nature had already killed. Long before they learned to hunt big game, our ancestors scavenged. They followed the smell of decay across the plains, waiting for lions or saber-toothed cats to finish their kill. When the predators were gone, the humans moved in, breaking bones open with stones to suck out the warm marrow inside, rich in fat, calories, and life. That marrow may have been what kept them alive during the coldest winters. This wasn't the diet of kings. It was the diet of desperation. Raw meat, rotting flesh, crushed insects, roots, and plants that barely grew in frozen soil. The air was filled with the stench of decay and smoke. There were no spices, no cooking pots, and often no fire. But then, something changed, something that would alter the course of human evolution forever. Fire. The discovery of fire wasn't just a moment of warmth. It was a revolution in the way humans ate. For the first time, our ancestors could cook their food. They could soften tough meat, destroy harmful bacteria, and unlock more calories. Cooking turned food into energy more efficiently, and that energy helped our brains grow. You could say that fire didn't just cook their food. It cooked evolution itself. Imagine a small band of Homo erectus gathered around a flickering fire, the night stretching endlessly around them. The smell of roasted meat fills the air. They laugh, they share, and for the first time, eating becomes more than just survival. It becomes community. It becomes human. But even with fire, food was scarce. When the Ice Age reached its peak, vast regions became deserts of ice. Mammoths, giant deer, and woolly rhinos roamed, but they were dangerous to hunt. A single hunt could mean life or death, not just for the animal, but for the hunters themselves. In this world, nothing was wasted. Bones were boiled for soup. Hides became containers. Even the organs, liver, heart, and brain, were eaten raw, believed to carry the life force of the animal. For prehistoric humans, the concept of disgust did not exist. To survive, they had to consume everything that could be consumed. Some tribes turned to insects, beetle larvae, termites, and worms that wriggled beneath rotten wood. They were easy to find, full of protein, and required no tools. Even today, some indigenous tribes eat in similar ways, keeping ancient survival traditions alive. For early humans, the earth itself was a pantry, one that offered its bounty grudgingly. They dug for edible roots, chewed fibrous plants, and collected seeds and nuts when seasons allowed. Those who lived near coasts or rivers found fish, shellfish, and seaweed. These became crucial sources of nutrients like omega-3, helping brain development and giving rise to the modern human we recognize today. In Africa, early Homo sapiens learned to track animals using patterns in dust and footprints. They developed primitive tools, stone flakes and hand axes, sharp enough to cut through hide and bone. With these tools came confidence. With confidence came risk. And with risk came the hunt. The first organized hunts were brutal displays of intelligence and teamwork. Small groups coordinated to drive herds of wild horses or reindeer into traps or over cliffs. The aftermath was chaos, blood, broken bodies, and a feast that could sustain the tribe for weeks. But if the hunt failed, they starved. It was a world ruled by uncertainty. One good hunt could feed a group for days. One bad season could wipe them out entirely. So they adapted. They learned to store food, drying meat in smoke, hiding fat-rich bones in the cold ground. They learned patterns of migration, following herds across continents. The first maps weren't drawn on stone. They were remembered in footsteps and stories. But hunger always returned. Even in times of plenty, the memory of starvation haunted them. It shaped their rituals, their art, and their beliefs. The earliest cave paintings, scenes of hunts, animals, and blood, weren't just art. They were prayers. They were the ancient wish to never go hungry again. Yet, hunger had another side, one that shaped our evolution in ways we still feel today. Scarcity forced our ancestors to innovate. They created tools, weapons, and social bonds. They learned to share and cooperate because no one survived alone. The act of eating, of sharing food, became the foundation of humanity itself. But let's return to that question. What did cavemen actually eat? The answer depends on where they lived and what they could find. In the frozen north, Neanderthals hunted mammoth, woolly rhino, and reindeer. They consumed massive amounts of meat, sometimes up to 80% of their diet. But they also gathered plants, moss, and even mushrooms. Traces of cooked grains have been found in their teeth, suggesting they may have ground seeds into primitive flour. In warmer regions of Africa, early Homo sapiens had access to more variety: fish, fruits, nuts, and honey. They cracked open skulls for brains, bones for marrow, and hives for honey. These high-calorie foods fueled their long migrations out of Africa, helping them spread across the globe. And sometimes, when everything else failed, they turned to each other. At the site of Gough's Cave in England, archaeologists discovered human bones, with cut marks, deliberate and precise. It wasn't murder. It was hunger, a ritual of survival at the edge of extinction. To modern ears, that sounds horrifying. But to them, it was necessity. The same instinct that drives a starving wolf to eat its dead packmate, the primal will to live. Over thousands of years, as climates warmed and knowledge spread, humans began to shape their environment instead of being ruled by it. They learned to hunt with strategy, to use traps and weapons carved from bone and wood. They learned to cook roots to remove toxins, to mix plants for better flavor, to store food for winter. These were the first sparks of culture and cuisine. Yet even as they advanced, the shadow of hunger never left. It became part of their myths. Ancient stories spoke of gods who demanded sacrifice for food, spirits that protected the hunt, and animals that offered themselves to humans in exchange for respect. Eating became more than biology. It became spiritual. In some Ice Age caves, archaeologists found bones deliberately arranged, not thrown away, but placed with care. The act of eating had become ritualized, sacred. Every meal was a reminder of the fragile balance between life and death. Today, we sit before overflowing plates, complaining of taste, waste, and choice. But for most of human history, eating was an act of courage. Every bite was earned. Every meal was uncertain. Our ancestors didn't eat to enjoy. They ate to endure. And if you could step back in time, to the frozen plains of Europe, or the savannas of Africa, you would smell it. The smoke, the sweat, the blood. You would see the desperation in their eyes as they tore into flesh still steaming from the kill. you would understand why they did it. Because hunger doesn't ask for morality. It demands obedience. In that world, food wasn't a preference. It was survival. The story of what cavemen ate is, in truth, the story of how we became human. Each bite of marrow, each charred piece of meat, each root dug from the dirt carried us one step closer to civilization. From chewing raw flesh to farming grains, from scavenging carcasses to baking bread, it all began in hunger. Our evolution was written not in stone, but in the stomach. And maybe, just maybe, that ancient hunger still lives within us. The drive to survive, to consume, to adapt. The instincts that kept our ancestors alive are buried deep inside our genes, waiting, watching, reminding us that once, long ago, survival was not about comfort. It was about courage. So, when you think of cavemen, don't picture the feast, picture the famine. Don't imagine the firelight laughter. Imagine the endless cold, the gnawing emptiness, the sound of wind across a barren land. Because that's where humanity was forged. In hunger, in desperation, and in the will to eat what others couldn't or wouldn't. The story of prehistoric food is not just about what they ate. It's about what they became because of it. And without that hunger, without those brutal meals, we wouldn't be here to tell the tale.